Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been quite a few weeks since I've posted something, and I do apologize for that, but work got kind of crazy, such as the life of a pizza delivery driver. First, I had Sundays off, and now all I'm doing is working on Sundays. So the videos are going to be a little haphazard for a little while here. They may come out on Friday, they may come out on Sunday. I just don't know. It all depends on my work schedule, but we're going to be getting into it and reviewing 3 albums in this one video. I'm going to try and keep each review fairly short. We're going to start with Vader's new album, Solitude in Madness. Now, this was an album that I was kind of indifferent about while I was listening to it. Of course, these are Polish legends, and when people think of things like death metal, like Vader plays, they often think of wild, ape-like frontmen screaming and growling as if demons have taken possession of their throats, while guitarists smack their way up and down the fretboard in a systematic destruction of all that is musically acceptable. After listening to this album, I can kind of understand where those people are coming from. Now, there are good things on here. The backing guitar work actually uses chord progressions that make some sense to the imagination. Instead of just haphazardly thudding away at various frets, the guitarists seem to create these little miniature worlds of death metal that are fun to explore and kind of find out where these paths lead. And there are tracks on here that are just going to go down as headbanging fun. Despair, Stigma of Divinity, and their cover of Acid Drinkers Dancing in the Slaughterhouse are sure to incite circle pits and hilariously bad dancing all over this great world of ours. The slower tracks like Bones, Incineration of the Gods, and Sanctification Denied help balance out the quicker tracks so as to make the album flow nicely. Now, my problem with the record is an over-reliance on blast beats. A trend, if I can call it that and get away with it, in death metal nowadays is to be as rhythmically confusing as possible. Songs, they aren't written with beats and grooves in mind, they're written with guitar solos and overexerted distortion pedals in mind. They're written from the standpoint of, let's whip the crowd into a frenzy instead of, let's create something that sounds compelling. Now, there's nothing wrong with blast beats on occasion. Some of my favorite metal tracks of all time have very big thunder within the rhythm section, but when every song on an album eschews good songwriting for unnecessary speed on a snare drum, it feels as if the band has let themselves down as musicians. So, overall, Vader's new one is a solid, unspectacular release. There are fun moments, the guitar work is enjoyable, but the glaring issue is that it was created within this same current era death metal template, and that led to boredom. In light of all that, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Coming up next, we are going to move to Green Carnation, Leaves of Yesteryear. Now, this is one of those bands that have seemed to have evolved in reverse order. Normally, when a band thinks of the stereotypical quote-quote progression of a metal band, they start light and they kind of get heavier as they go along. Not so with these Norwegians. Their debut cassette, released all the way back in 1991, which I listened to part of it on YouTube, it is so different between that and the album that I'm talking about here. You know, for a demo, it was pretty lengthy. It was nearly a half hour long, but it was filled with these short, compact compositions that scratched at the death metal fans' inner longing for the musically misanthropic and grave. Then the band went quiet for 9 years. They released a debut album in 2000, and it marked a dramatic departure from their death metal sound into one of sort of Paradise Lost-esque doom, with a little bit of sort of current Opeth-style melody kind of tossed in. They released 4 more albums, disbanded in 2007, returned in 2014, and it's taken them another 6 years to release their return album. But the wait is over, and now we get to experience Leaves of Yesteryear, released May 8th on Season of Mist. 14 years? Did they turn out a good album, or did it leave them rusty? Let's find out. Now, first of all, this album is not a return to their death metal roots, and that's something I can appreciate. After listening to that demo, I can kind of say that I prefer the musically progressive melodic version of the group. Again, I bring up a comparison with the band Opeth. Last year's Incauda Venenum and this year's Leaves of Yesteryear sound kind of like carbon copies of each other, only Green Carnation, at least for these albums, have committed to writing compositions that are a wee bit longer. Back in the early aughts, the two bands might have been on the same level in terms of song length, but if you compare them now, there's no doubt that the Norwegians have the Swedes beat in that department. Now, this album is filled with songs that wander, but they never seem to lose their way. You know, I find that with a lot of progressive tracks, they kind of spin around a nucleus for a while, and then fire off in their own separate and disparate directions. But that's just not the case with Leaves of Yesteryear. Every instrument has its place, and every note and chord makes absolute sense. It all plays together beautifully in a tribute to the band's great musical talent and ability. In a world ravaged by a sickness and a genre overly saturated with extremity, it's good to know that there are still metal bands out there who have an appreciation for the softer side of music. They balance it very well between the hard-driving guitars and a penchant for pianos and keyboards. Sometimes the heaviness of a song is found within the atmosphere or lyricism, and this album proves that. Well, it's not the heaviest thing out there, nowhere near it, but some of the lyrics and darkened atmosphere is subtly oppressive. Then they end it off with a beautifully stripped down yet amazingly updated cover of Black Sabbath's Solitude off Master of Reality. Yes, in an era where illness and corruption rule the day, it's music like this that help cure the daily notes of depression and sadness that sweep over our homes. It's beautiful, melancholic in just the right manner, and shows that the band have not lost their touch even after 14 years of being away. So, in light of all that, it gets a hearty 5 out of 5. And finally, we get to review an album that came out today, and that is Paradise Lost's Obsidian. So, Paradise Lost, as many of you probably know, these are the progenitors of the Doom E, Death E formula now copied by so many other bands. Since 1990, they've been putting out albums on a very consistent basis and have etched a place for themselves among the pantheon of doom metal's giants. Their last offering, Medusa, was one of the most incredible albums that 2017 had to offer, and they've continued their upward trend on their latest offering. It's called Obsidian, and it was released May 15th on Nuclear Blast. This is an album that just instantly pulls you in. From the opening strains of Darker Thoughts all the way to the final doom-laden notes of Defiler, this record has a way of just holding sway over the listener, and it transports you into this bleak yet absolutely beautiful soundscape where mountains of guitars rise in the distance across this sea of beautiful choruses. As you get closer and closer to those peaks, you realize just how jagged they are as Nick Holmes' absolutely stupendous vocal work creates thorns where there need to be thorns and these soft clouds and patches of grass where there need to be soft clouds and patches of grass. Nothing on this record feels out of place, and it is completely on par with their last offering. In fact, it might be even better. To accompany these mountains and seas, sharply executed boulders of drums pour down on the listener, reinforcing this album's dark, depressing ideology. It hits you right when it needs to, speeding up when the tracks become more aggressive, and fading at just the correct moment. It helps wrap the songs up in tight bows of barbed wire and roses, if I might use a bit of poetic description. It leaves you reflecting on what has been and what is to come, which is what makes the album such an amazing listen. Reflection. I think that is the true nature of this album. When you finish a song, you kind of go back and you reread the lyrics and you realize just how ably they are written. I mean, these are some really, really good lyrics. Album opener Darker Thoughts warns of a one-way street that humans are walking and will never lead to something fulfilling, or in some cases, it might turn absolutely lethal. The track Defiler closes the album with the following question: who controls the mind that drifts to hell? Well, in this reviewer's opinion, Paradise Lost controls that very mind, and this is the soundtrack to that drifting. It is a beautiful drifting, and one that leaves you wanting nothing more, yet at the same time, so much more. The brilliance of the album lies in its own need to explain suffering while offering the glimmerings of hope in a place far beyond its mountainous soundscape. Overall, it gets a 5 out of 5. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and I will see you next time, hopefully with a proper episode of Metalhead Central. Thanks for watching again. I'll see y'all later.